Hello my lovelies and welcome to Jessie James Beads. I hope that you are doing well and have had a gorgeous day. I'm Jem. If we've never met before, I live in the United Kingdom and I work primarily with wire and alongside Jessie James Beads to create some tutorials for you to follow along with, to watch, to be inspired by, to take away, to dabble in the world of wire wrapping jewellery. Shall we head down to the board and have a quick look at what we're going to make today? Let's just switch that camera over. So we're going to make, and this was a special request from our fearless leader Sarah, to make a chaos styled heart. And we're going to work today with a beautiful blend called Bead Pink. Very, very special pieces that can be created with this to gift, to sell, to raise funds, to love yourself as well. We were talking yesterday about allowing ourselves the opportunity to make things just for us. So if that appeals to you, then do make something just for you. I'm just going to press some buttons on the Book of Face and make sure that we are indeed broadcasting and that I'm not sat here talking and nobody can hear me. I can see so far that the lovely Cherie has joined us. Hello, Cherie. Celia is in from wet and cold Lancashire. It's not that different here, my love. Hello, Jem from Houston, Texas. Two Towels got on in before me before I tell the world that she lives in Florida when she doesn't. She lives in Texas, way of the world. Debbie is joining us from Oregon. Tell me, Debbie, are you having beautiful red turning leaves in gorgeous, gorgeous Oregon? Wanda has joined us as well, and Wendy is sliding on in for today's class. So we are going to be learning to make this piece together. It's something that you can absolutely create a million times over and it will never be the same. A beautiful chaos heart is what we're going to learn to create today, and this was a very special creation request from the gorgeous Sarah James, our creative and wonderful leader. Let's have a look and see what people are saying. Wendy is in. Florence is in from Ocala, Florida, where it's sweater weather this morning. And now it's shorts and a tank top with flip-flops this afternoon. Sounds good to me. Sounds a bit like Britain. Don't like the weather? Hang around, it'll change. Darlene has joined us. Wendy's in from California. Debbie says the colours of the leaves are amazing. Send pics, send pics. Sandy says, hi, Jen. And Florence says it's beautiful. Thank you so much, my darling. Means the world to me to have your thoughts on the pieces that we get to create together. So with a bead mix like this, you can be inspired however you desire. Now I'm going to show you how to create the heart form, which will give you opportunities to add in little dangles down at the bottom if you wanted to. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of our technique today, I want to show you a little bit more about what's in this gorgeous, gorgeous mix. Now you can probably see from there that 10% donated to the National Breast Cancer Foundation from these boxes, which I think is a wonderful and worthwhile cause. They have gone all out with this one. The fabric in these tassels is absolutely glorious. So if you like the feel of those, and I promise that you will, that could be your dropper if you wanted it to be. I am absolutely positively going to use another one of these giant, I call these marble centres because they remind me of childhood. When in the playground, the boys used to play with the marbles. And some of the girls did too, but I was so rubbish at it, I just missed every single time. MC says, good afternoon, Jen, and everyone. Have a great day from Greenville in Texas. Paula is in. Good morning. Happy Thursday. Happy Thursday to you too, treasure. We've got some faux pearl drops. Perfect for recreating Elizabethan jewellery, that shape. Absolutely gorgeous. Oh, wow, I didn't realise we got 4 of these. So these I like to think of as little fairy skirts. So you could very, very simply do a little bit of a very simple wire connector above one of these and make your own little fairies with those. They're gorgeous. We've got the suede or suedette. I don't know what's in them. Those 2 tassels there. It's a gorgeous colour anyway. Kay says, hey, Jem from Kay, Goose Creek in South Carolina. Welcome to you, my lovely. Thanks for joining us. We've also got the petite and silky tassels to go with. Let's have a look. More sparkle. What's better than a little bit of sparkle? More sparkle. So I've got faceted in a blush pink. I have got faceted in a large crystal up at the top there as well. And I think I'm going to recreate the design as I have done in the initial placement. You get lots and lots of these beautiful pink ribbon, campaign ribbons. Very, very strong metallics to work with. You could very simply put those on earring findings if you wanted to. Oh gosh, there's a lovely silvery one as well with the insignia Hope, which I think is beautiful. You have got another one of those metallics, and in here we have got yet another one of those gorgeous flutterbys. I'm going to reserve one of those flutterbys for use in a little while. Lots of crackle pink. Oh, more tassels than you could chuck a stick at. I don't know if that's an expression in the States. It just means that there are very many tassels to be playing with. In here we have got pink stars. I love stars. Stars on everything for me. And I've also got more of those Elizabethan style faux pearl drops. Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. Check this out. Absolutely glorious. Do you know what? I'm switching out. I'm changing my mind. Designing on the fly. That's what we're going to do for this piece. And then we can add in whatever we fancy from what's left in here. There are metallics, spacer beads, bead caps with a really nice patination on them, kind of highlighted in that antique colour. And of course you've got those rhinestone encrusted spacer beads. There's plenty in there, actually loads and loads. So I'm going to clear the board back down for a moment and just chat to you for a second. We have that expression too, but people don't say it enough. Make it your own, make it your thing. I've had more coffee today than you can chuck a stick at. I haven't actually, I only had one before I left work and it was raining and I was on the bus today. You know, sometimes you got to go on the bus and it was wet and there. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to just cozying up for the rest of the evening. It's just after 6 o'clock in the evening here in Blighty. And it's very, very much sweater weather. So, you may have noticed that I am sporting somewhat of a festive design. Technically a tree decoration. And if you fancy joining me at the winter workshop, which is going to be spread over a number of classes throughout November and the very early part of December, I believe, drop me an inbox later because I might have a little cheeky treat for you. Boxes will be shipping very, very soon and I can't wait to get my paws on it. So if you have been umming and ahhing about whether or not to join us, drop me an inbox and I'll send you a little bit of a code. I've said enough. I've said too much. Cherie says, lovely beads and tassels and a wonderful project. What a great day. Thank you so much. I do like to be in the company of positivity. I am a positivity ambassador, which means that I am always here to try and smile, even if the weather is awful. Bus and train for me today too, Celia. I feel you, darling. Teresa is in. Hello to all from, I'm going to say Racer in Tampa, but it could be Reza. I don't know, we all know my pronunciation is a bit rubbish. So let's head back down to that board now. This is what we're going to make together. Now I'm choosing to use a slightly heavier wire than I normally would do. Let's just scooch this out the way so I don't send it flying. Otherwise I will be chucking a stick at things, won't I? For my frame wire, I'm going to be working with 18 gauge round wire. Now I've created the piece in silver colour wire because it looks really, really pretty with the pink. But for the camera, I'm going to be working in copper because it just shows up so beautifully. Risa, says Teresa. Thank you very much. Or Teresa. I could have been saying it wrong this whole time. Susie is in from Arizona. Hello to you too. So I've got around about 20 inches of my 18 gauge wire right now. This is far more than I need, but I do like to be prepared. So let's just give that a nice warm through to begin with. And I'm warming through the first half or so because that's where I want to start working, to be honest. There we go. So what we're going to do is estimate around about a third of the way along. So I'm probably about 6 or 7 inches from one end. And I'm just going to put a little bit of a loop in the wire. And you can do that simply by turning around your round nose pliers until you get a loop down at the bottom. And this forms the bottom of the heart. So let me just grab the wire. You can see I've got a short amount on one side and a long amount on the other side, and all I've done is created a loop shape down at the base. Once I'm happy with that shape, I'm going to give it a little bit of strengthening just by squishing it, opening and closing with those flat facing pliers, and that just hardens it slightly and sets the shape. What I'm not doing is squishing where one wire crosses over the other, because that will damage and weaken it. Gabriella says, hello everyone. Hello Gabriella, how are you today, darling? I hope you've had a beautiful day. Now I always make these the same way around, so I'm going to put the long side over on the left and the short side on the right hand side. I'm going to give that a bit of a warm through. Now you can transfer the skills from today's class to any project. It doesn't have to be jewellery. If it's not jewellery, it could be wall art, home decor. You could even put it on the Christmas tree if you choose your festive colours. Absolutely up to you what you do with it once you've got the knack. So to make the lobes of a heart on the first side, what I do is just coil around from that end, and I'm going to trim that very end bit away because it had a bit of a ridge on the end and I don't want that in my design. I want it to be as smooth and flat as possible. So with my round nose pliers, I'm going to start creating a coil. Now this doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be tidy. I'm just going to use those round nose pliers to start off to make a circular form with the wire coming away. Doesn't that look pretty on the camera, the colour? So I know that Sarah hinted yesterday when I was chatting with her and May that rose gold is inbound. Rose gold colour wire and rose gold colour everything is just on the back burner right now, but soon enough, rose gold for everyone. Anne is in from California. Hello, my darling, how are you? And Jane has joined us too. Hello, sweetheart. So what I'm going to do, rather than creating a tight coil today, I'm going to make quite a loose coil. And this is going to be the first part of my heart. If that gets away from you, you can just simply play with the wires until it sits exactly how you want it to. So I've given us enough wire here to make a really large size heart, and that is because it's easier for me to show you on a slightly grander scale. Now if you're making jewellery for yourself, if I just put my hand in the image for an idea of size, there's quite a large piece. I have fairly medium to average size hands. So it's quite a large piece with a long drop. You might want to size that down. You might want to only have a single piece on the bottom, just a charm or one of the tassels or something. You don't even have to have anything coming off the bottom. Just because there's a loop there doesn't mean you have to do anything with it. So as I said, I'm going to make quite a large size piece just to demonstrate the technique to you, and then it's completely within your power to make that the size and form that you want. So I'm going to continue pushing this circular form around. It's probably easier by hand just to give you an idea. But what I'm looking to do is to keep a reasonable distance between the wires. I've gone for 2 circuits that are quite close, and then I've allowed that wire to just open out slightly until I get the first half of my heart shape. Now that's, as I say, that's quite large for a piece of jewellery to wear on the neckline. You can see that on the back of the hand it's a jolly large piece. It doesn't have to be that big for you, it just helps me to show you what that looks like. And once you're happy with that kind of shape and size, again you have the opportunity to very, very gently just give that a little bit of an, I call it an om-nomming. Opening and closing flat facing pliers on that wire will harden it up slightly. Your other opportunity at this stage is to pop a small block underneath. If you joined us for summer camp, you will have your hammer and block that were provided in the summer camp kit. But if you don't have access to a hammer and block, you can simply open and close the pliers, and that will start to give it a little bit more rigidity. Can you see how that's just a little bit more set? And I haven't done anything too difficult. The next thing we're going to do is just move that off screen so I can bring the long tail of wire, and we were about 1/3 of the way along when we created that small loop down at the bottom. And what I'm going to do here is put some warmth and heat into the next piece of wire coming away from the loop. Stacey's joined us. Hello Stacey, how are you today, sweetheart? Now, if you are warming the wire and you're using this beautiful round 18 gauge wire, there's every possibility that when you draw the wire over, you'll get a reasonably good heart shape to work with. If that fills you with dread, grab a round form. I always find a lip gloss or a mini torch. You could also use a ring mandrel if you have one. Whatever it takes for you to get a heart shape that you are happy with. Doesn't matter what anybody else says, whether it looks like an anatomical heart or whether it looks like a fairy tale heart, completely within your control. So I've got the second lobe of my heart, and what I want to do now is take this tail of wire that's coming across, put quite a sharp angle in it, and send that over the top of the first section of heart shape that we created together. So I need to sharpen up that angle in the middle. So I'm just going to push the first side of the heart out of the way, pop my pliers back in and just sharpen that up slightly. I can open and close that a couple of times until I get a slightly more detailed notch. It's actually called a cleavage. Well, who knew? Stacey says chilly but doing well. Anne says beautiful heart pendant. Thank you so much, my lovely. The frame we're working with is 18 gauge and we started with a good 20 inches. Far too much, but there we go. So you'll notice that I very, very gently, just for a very small distance, this is no more than 1/8 of an inch, I've got those to sit side by side. And once I'm happy that I've got that contact point where they match, there's just a little bit of shaping, I'm going to bring the remainder of the wire up in a straight line and put some more residual strength into it, just this first inch or so. I don't want to flatten it, I don't want to change its shape, I just want to make it slightly stronger and not too far up, just the first inch or so, because that means that when I put my beads on, it'll stay rigid, but this section up here that's after an inch, that needs to be flexible so I can make a wrapped loop so that you can wear it or you can hang it, whatever you plan on doing with your chaos heart. And if you missed the part I was talking at the beginning, this is a special request from Sarah to you. So I'm going to grab a scrap length now. It only really needs to be a couple of inches, and this is now 22 gauge. I'm only working in 2 gauges of wire today. This is a scrap length of 22 gauge, and all I need to do is wire that small section of the first bit of the upright to the first spiral side of the heart. Now, if you want to do that as a weave, you absolutely can, but in the basic principle, we're simply tying things together. People look at some of my more complicated jewellery pieces with wire, and they're afraid to ask how it comes together. Well, all we're doing is we're making bits, and then we're wiring those bits together like it's a needle and thread. So I'm going to take my centre of that scrap length of wire, and I'm going to lay it over the 2 bits that I want to join. And just to remind you, it's that first section of the upright and where it touches the other piece of that heart. So I'm just going to push the tail of my wire down and through, and all I want to do is wrap around those 2 pieces of wire. And what I would endeavour to do is keep those coils that I'm making as tight and as neat as possible, just because it will last longer if it's got nowhere to go. So wire tends to, if it is allowed to move, it can become weakened. So what we're looking to do is to keep this as steady as possible. So I'm going to continue wrapping around those 2 pieces of wire, which we lined up side by side, until we've got a really good section of that coiled wire. And I'm just tightening that up slightly. And you'll see that I've come to the end, just here, of the bit where those 2 separate wires were side by side, and I've reached the bit where the tail of wire, which I'm going to use to put some beads on in a moment, that's coming away by itself. So I'm going to wrap a couple of times just around that upright, just to tie off my wire. And when I'm wrapping any finer wire around any heavier wire, I will always look to begin and end as much as I possibly can with a single piece of that finer wire. So rather than wrapping around the 2 pieces side by side and then ending, you have a large section of wire to cover because you're going over 2 of them at a time. Let's just get that out of the way into the melt pot. And then I'm going to squish those 3 little sections that are just the one core wire. Tidy up my wraps just to make sure that's as neat as possible. I'm just going to spin this slowly around, and I think I can probably get one more wrap around both pieces of wire. And what you can do is just push that leading edge up through that spiral nice and slowly. And then I will finish off by wrapping 3 times around the first part of that spiral. Once I finish this part of the tutorial, I'm going to lift this up towards the camera so you can get a really good look at how that has come together. It's a nice, sturdy, solid base that you can use for lots and lots of projects. So I'm trimming the wire away now into the scrap pot for later. And I'm going to take that tail and just squish that across the back and make sure that it sits flat. And give that a bit of a tiny little push. Once I'm happy with that sitting correctly, I'm going to go over the top of everything with my pliers and very gently push down. And what I'm doing here is I'm setting that slightly finer wire. I'm going to bring this up to the camera. It will go slightly blurry because it's not at that focal length, but you can see I've got 3 wraps around the core. And then there's maybe 6 or 7 wraps around both wires together, and then 3 wraps at the other end just around that tail of wire. And on the back I will just make sure that there's no sticky uppy bits. So that in and of itself is the beginning of many pieces of jewellery. As far as I'm concerned, you can go a long way from here. I'm going to just straighten up the core of the wire now. And you can add on whatever beads you fancy. Teresa says daughter works from home and having their weekly meeting, so I'm going to get off here so everyone can hear what they are listening to. I can watch the replay. Welcome to the replay later, my darling. You take care. Oh my goodness. I wouldn't mind the money, but I don't fancy the stress. How do you keep the ends of your wire from poking out and being felt? So, what I tend to do, and thank you for that, Teresa, what I tend to do is try to cut the very end bit so that it's going to sit inside the spiral. So in that way, what we will do is tuck the wire and tidy, tuck and tidy. Now the finer gauge wire is coming over the top and round like so, and I'm going to move my flat facing pliers in the same direction. And when I do this, this is something you can use your wire scraps for to practice. Rotate around that coil you've just created, like so, and you'll find that the very end of the wire becomes smooth and pushed down. And in that way, it's much less likely to interfere with clothes skin or hair or be felt as a naughty, sticky, uppy bit. So whatever order you want to add beads onto the end, let's find a couple. I think we'll have one of these. And then I think we're going to use that absolutely ridiculously outstanding gorgeous heart. I haven't tried this on the wire yet, so it may not go on an 18, so let's just give it a look. Perfectly, although there's a kink in my wire at the top, so I'm just going to trim that away. Always pays to have a little bit of reserve. When you're making a project, cut it a little bit long, and then if you come to a snafu like that, you can deal with it accordingly. So I don't think I'm going to put another bead over the top. I'm just going to go for a wrapped loop now. So what I will do for a wrapped loop, because I want the option of wearing this as jewellery, I'm going to support my core wire, push the tail forwards, and then if you have your round nose pliers or if you have your bail makers, you can create a nice round form. And if you set your loop at 90 degrees to the heart design, it means you can adapt that to be worn as jewellery. If you want to hang it from a hook, you can very simply just put a little bit of cord or ribbon through the top. So let's just tie off that round section up at the top. I'm going to make that slightly larger so I can get a good size clasp through that gap. And then I'm just going to rotate the very, very ends of my wire around to just fill that gap. You could spend a little bit more time than I have and get a slightly nicer coil going on, but I'm not overly worried. bring that tail over the front and trim away the excess. So we started with around 20 inches and I've probably cut off about 4 of those. So 15 or 16 inches I'm sure would be plenty for a piece of this size. But if you want something much larger, then it pays to just have a little bit of contingency wire. So I'm going to pop a little coil on this section. There isn't one on my demonstration piece, but I use different beads up on the neck of the design there. So I've got that spiral going, and differently to how we worked earlier, I'm going to keep this coil nice and taut. And then I'm going to push that up and over the bail that we created, or the hanging loop if you prefer. Just going to grab hold of that coil and push it upwards. So that's the basis of our design. Now that in and of itself is a really pretty piece of jewellery to wear, I think. You could simply wire on a cluster of beads on the inside or the outside, whatever you fancy. The next technique I want to share with you is my chaos technique. And it's called chaos because there really isn't a wrong way of doing it. There are ways that I would say work nicely, but don't fret if it doesn't go completely according to plan. So let's pop the demonstration piece down just in the corner and move on to our next layer of wire to work with. So I've got 2 lengths of around about 12 inches, and this is cut from 22 gauge wire in the UK. That's known as 0.6mm. And what I'm going to do now is just run those between thumb and forefinger once to get them smooth, fluid and pliable. And in the centre of that approximately 12-inch pair, I'm going to press thumb and forefinger together and create a loop. And this loop is going to have those 2 wires sat side by side. The only place they're crossing over is where both wires cross over the top of the other end. So these are always side by side. If you can imagine them being like train tracks or tram tracks, I'm going to give that a squish because it's a nice place to get started from. And what we're going to do is lay that over the design. Doesn't matter where you start where you fancy. I'm going to pop it over the spiral because we're going to cover up that spiral in a way. And I'm going to pinch that down. This gives me a really good opportunity to use the spiral to pinch my coil against my loop, I beg your pardon. And everything is over the top. My 2 slightly finer gauge wires are over the top of the heart frame. And I'm going to now wrap twice around the edge of that heart shape, and you'll see I'm using my finger as a stopper, and that helps those 2 wires to stay side by side. And then I'm going to wrap that for a second time around the back of the design. Now if that gets a little bit loose or baggy, you can very gently tighten that up and just sit that into position. So we've added our first loop onto the surface of our chaos heart. And what we're going to do now is just go a little bit chaotic. So if I just pull that back out of the way, that's the other end. We'll worry about that in a minute. Let's work on this side. I've firmly attached approximately the middle of the wire, of the finer gauge wire, onto the heart frame. I've got a little loop-de-loop going in one direction. I think I might have it going back over the other way. And I'm just going to support that by pinching with my thumb and forefinger, whilst I rotate the tails of the wire around. And you'll see, if I just lift this away from the project, it's a bit like a crazy motorway or freeway junction. So I've got a couple of loops going on. Now, your loops can go in the same direction, they can switch direction. And I'm going to give that just a little bit of strength before I move on. That helps the wire to stay side by side. And when I'm squishing down, I'm using flat facing pliers. These are my bent chain nose pliers. And I'm just allowing the wires to be flattened side by side so they remain like tram tracks or railway tracks. And then I'm going to pinch the next section, and because it's a chaos design, they can be super close, they can be irregularly spaced, they don't have to be once every 3/4 of an inch or anything like that. There's not much of a law to it. So I've got some coils. If I again lift them away from the design, you can see they're going backwards and forwards at the moment. So let's be a rebel and make the next loop in the same direction. So I've got a series of 4 loops using that railway track or tram track design. And I think I'm going to take that now to the other side of the frame and just tie it on carefully. So if I pinch with my non-dominant hand to hold the looped section of chaos wire in position, I'm just going to warm the tail through just once, and then I'm going to start bringing those tails up, and I'm wrapping around the frame wire. So I've used 18 gauge because it's very accessible and most of us have some, but you could use a slightly heavier wire if you wanted to. Now I'm just very, very gently bringing those tails together. And we've done our first layer on the front of the design. So if I flip this over and look at the rear of the design, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. What this enables me to do is have a front and a back that are virtually indistinguishable, which means that you have, if you want, dual-faced jewellery, and I really like the idea of that. If we flip this over, it's not going to be quite as comfortable against the body, but you just have a tangle, a chaotic weave of wire, which is beautiful in and of itself. But if you flip it over to the other side, you've got the option to add beads, you can add charms. I added one of those lovely little butterfly charms and made it mobile. So I do like jewellery that's a little bit mobile. So I'm going to continue on now until I've used up my first layer of wire. And it's just basically doing the same thing. What I'm looking to do is fill space. This piece that we're looking at had 3 lots of 12 inches each of that 22 gauge wire. So it's 6 lengths altogether, but done in 2 and 2 and 2. So that's the kind of look that you get. Because it's a slightly smaller heart, the wire will weave backwards and forwards a couple more times. So I'm just going to pinch with my non-dominant hand, spin around until I get a loop. Now you'll see here that because I've been a bit casual about it, those wires have come apart. I want them to sit side by side. So 9 times out of 10, you can just grab those pliers and get it to behave. In grabbing the wire, giving it a bit of a squeeze, it's now much more likely to behave because it has slightly more residual strength. So I think I'll be very, very simple here and twist the wire around into a second loop, and then just take that to the far side and wrap it around. Now we're very unlikely to get another loop out of the section of wire that we have. So what I'm going to do is flip us back to the front of the design for now. I'm just going to tighten up this coil, make sure that I'm happy that those 2 wires are kept flat and side by side, and I'm going to draw the tails just past the top of the design. So you can see they're just coming over the top of that frame wire. I'm going to take my semi-flush cutters, use the flush side to trim that very, very short, but not completely. And then what we can do now is take those last 2 tiny sticky uppy bits and just fit them so that they end inside the frame. So if I just get that to sit neatly first, you can see I'm employing that same technique, opening and closing, rotating in the same direction that the wire is travelling, and it just smooths it off. So if by any chance I cut that a little bit long and it does come to the rear of the design, there's no scratching, there's no cutting involved. So let's flip over to the back again and see how much wire we've got left to work with. So we've got a reasonable amount, so why don't we go loopy? Let's make some nice chaotic loops. Flip that wire around, and the reason it stays side by side for the most part, she says, is that I pinch it really firmly. If it does come away from you, you can just undo those wires slightly. I'm going to warm that back through, and I'm going to go again in the same direction. Draw the tails across, and you'll see that we've managed to save that piece of wire. If you absolutely mangle it, cut it off and get a new bit of wire. It's not the end of the world. So there's my first loop on this section. Let's add another one. And you can have a couple of lazy loops. You can have a whole cluster of loops. You can have as many loops as you can fit on the wire. or you can just do 1 or 2 with each pass and build it up slowly. So if I again pull that forwards from the design, you'll see we've got backwards and forwards there. What you may also notice is I've slightly deformed that heart frame, just pushing that back, and you'll see it goes straight back to true. That's the beauty of warming your wire before you start working, is you have the opportunity to fix things as they arrive. So let's go for another couple of loops before we get all the way to the far side. Now this is quite a generous piece of wire, so I've got choices here. I can try and make as many loops as possible, take it around the edge and be finished, or I can just stretch that out slightly. Let's not stretch it out quite that much though, hey. Give that a squish and a squeeze to get some residual strength. I'm just going to bring the tail of wire over to where I think it will look nice to finish off. You can see that when you're making live, these things do happen, and it's relatively easy to just sort that out. So let's take the tail, give that tail wire a little bit of a warm through. I'm going to push that up inside that heart frame, draw it all the way around, tighten up those 2 coils very, very gently, just pushing those 2 little coils together. And if I bring this back over to the front, I can see I do have enough wire left for at least 1 or 2 more loops before I finish this section away. So I'm just pressing down carefully to try and keep the form neat. If they come apart, just re-warm them. And then what we're going to do is just draw that wire all the way around. Let's go for a second one. I think we've got space for a second one before the wire runs out. So I'm going to grip a hold of that loop-de-loop again and pull that into position, and there's just enough wire left for me to draw that up to the top. If you struggle for space, and as you add more layers it gets a little bit more tricky, what you can do is cut the last little bit away. Let's just get that out of the way. And then you can use your pliers to help you. See, I'm just curling that very, very gently to enable me to get that into whatever gap I have available. Tighten those little loop-de-loops up. I'm going to flip this over again now. Trim away that last little bit of excess into the melt pot, and then we're going to just squish those 2 end bits until they sit as neatly as possible inside that frame wire. So obviously sometimes it doesn't go quite according to plan. You might need to trim a tiny bit extra, but for the most part, as long as you're using that motion, that rolling around motion, you can smooth the wires down. So I'm not going to do that over and over again. To generate this level of chaos, there were 6 lengths over 3 techniques. So you can see it does fill up, and it's so lovely and squishy and pliable. It's a really wonderful tactile piece to work with, actually. So what you would do is build up layer after layer, and then you can take some more of your 22 gauge wire. I've got a little bit just spare here. And you can add your beads on in a very simple way. So let's go for quite a large bead, just so that it's easier to see. So I've got one of these hot crackle pinks, and what I would do is work with a nice long length. If you don't have any 22, 24 will work as well, but you might need a few more passes of wire to fill the design. So I'm going to take my scrap of either 22 or 24 gauge wire, and I'm going to pop my bead on in the middle. I'm going to bend those wires around. I'm just going to bring those 2 wires together and find myself a place into which I want to anchor that bead. So let's say we just wanted to put a single beautiful pink crackle bead into position. All we're going to do next is take those tail wires in opposite directions. So let me flip the design over. Those 2 wires came through one of those loops together. I've taken one to the left and one to the right. And because you've got a lovely chaos design, it's really easy to just hide those wires away. Now, if I'm adding a whole cluster of beads, let me grab one of my Christmas tutorials. If you're using lots and lots of beads, this is a chaos bauble. You can use one piece of wire for multiple beads, but the technique is exactly the same. You start with one in the middle, add one on in the middle, and then you would just bring the wire up through any loop you can find, add another bead and continue in exactly the same way. The only proviso really is that you end on the outside frame and you would wrap. By this time you've got less space around that outside margin, but if possible go for 3 wraps around that outer edge, making sure that you police your scraps so you don't accidentally stand on them. And the same rule applies, try and tuck the end of the wire away into the design where it's hidden. So I would just, maybe if I'm not adding too many, I might even add a single little loop. You can see that quite clearly on the camera. Smush that down into the design, take the tail of wire over to the very, very edge of the frame and draw that around. So I'm going to go for 1. Let's go for a second one. Scooch those wires up nice and tight and then trim away the excess into the scrap pot. And then we're going to push that little tail down into the design and out of the way. So although we've only added 1 set of 2 wires, you can see how they build up. You can add much larger beads, smaller beads. This is exactly the same technique. Those are the Chaos Baubles, and this is your Chaos Heart. Now to add a section on at the bottom, do you remember we had a couple of inches left over of that heavier gauge, that 18 gauge? I'm just going to give that a quick smooth through. And we'll probably only need about 1 3/4 to 2 inches. And all I'm going to do is to create a simple loop on one end. So by turning the wire around in a circular form, let me just clear the board slightly so you can see underneath. I've got a simple loop created. I'm going to turn that into a straight line, much like you would a head pin or an eye pin. So if you have eye pins, you can simply use eye pins if they match your colour scheme. So I've got a simple loop created. Let's find a bead to add on to the bottom. Shall we use one of the pink ones? How about one of the metal ones? So if I want to add this on in the same orientation, we need to take a look at where the simple loop is going to go. So that needs to be at 90 degrees. And then the loop on my charm today is through in this direction. So I will need to change the direction of my component. Let's make another simple loop. Draw that around over the top. It's like a figure of 8 but wonky in the middle. It changes through 90 degrees. So let's trim that excess away. Before I attach this to my heart design or to my charm, I'm going to squish the one side. It's like a jump ring that's been soldered to a jump ring at 90 degrees. These are really useful, handy little things to be able to make on the fly. So I'm going to open this up exactly like a jump ring. So you don't open a jump ring like this, you open it sideways. So I'm going to do exactly the same here. I'm going to pop my charm into, it helps if I make the gap wide enough. I'm going to pop my charm into the device, the connector. I'm going to just close that up, making sure that I'm happy that everything connects properly. Nice and neat and tidy. And then we're going to do exactly the same on the other side, opening it up like a jump ring. And then we're going to add that into that loop where we started at the very beginning of this design. Close that back up just like a jump ring, give it a squish when it's in position. And there you have your Chaos Heart, utilising the gorgeous Wee Bead Pink mix. Let's get the light off that, that's a little bit better. So I happen to think that it actually looks really beautiful in silver tone wire or silver plated wire, whatever you have available. Both of these projects will work with your German style or medium temper wire. This is made in Bead in the 18 gauge for the frame and 22 gauge for the infill. This is made in a raw copper, so that's much softer. With a raw copper you're working with a super soft wire and you will need to add strength as you go through. Another thing to note though is when you've added all of these layers you get an intrinsic strength to your design. So you can work this technique however you desire. You can make ovals if you want to make eggs for Easter time, if you want to make miniature wreaths for the door, if you want to make charms, pendants, whatever you fancy, the technique is there to guide you through. And there's no way to do it wrong, really. If you try to keep those wires side by side, then all of those beautiful flourishes will work to your benefit. So I'm Jem. It's been my pleasure to be with you here at Jessie James Beads today. Thank you for having me in your home. Thank you for beading pink with me and Jessie James. I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. I will be back on Thursday of next week, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, to make some stacking bangles. I'm so tempted to show you. Oh, I'll get told off if I do. No, it's the Pantone Pearl strands. Any and all of them will work beautifully. If you haven't signed up for the winter workshops, kits are shipping super soon, like super, super soon. And if you haven't signed up for it yet, drop me an inbox and I'll send you a reason to sign up for it today. Have a beautiful day, afternoon, morning, evening, nighttime, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. I will look forward to seeing you very, very soon again. Bye for now.